Now, granted, I am speaking one word at a time, and you are receiving one word at a time. But that's only the physical part. What about the actual process that goes on in the mind? Now, as I'm speaking, I'm not simply drawing words out one at a time from my mind. I'm considering all the possibilities of words that there might be, and then selecting those which I hope at the moment will be most important. And as all that process is going on, I'm also seeing the things in front of me, the camera, also aware of you, of myself trying to speak to you to communicate. So I'm picking from a whole range of words the ones which seem appropriate at the time. In addition to that, I'm keeping things like my breath rhythm going, my heartbeat, and in fact, the whole of my mind is holding in fairly delicate balance all the chemicals inside it. So it isn't a linear or list-like process. Speaking is choosing from a totally delicate, interwoven, interlaced network of ideas. Now, similarly with you, when you are listening to what I am speaking to you, you are criticizing, analyzing, understanding, watching, perhaps even thinking about something else. The same thing applies to print. When we are reading the lines, our mind is busy making associations, building images, going through exactly the same intricate processes as for speaking. So our minds don't work in patterns, don't work in lines. Make sure you remember that. Don't work in lines, they work in patterns. And I'm going to now give an example of how we can use this. Now let's imagine that I am particularly interested in Rasputin. Rasputin, the notorious Russian monk who dealt with the aristocracy in Russia just before the Russian Revolution. And I'm reading a book about Rasputin and want to make notes on the subject. Now, what I'm going to do is to make notes in pattern form, not in the normal list-like form, but pattern notes. So I start where the pattern, where the idea would start, in the center. In the center of my notes, I put Rasputin. I do not put a list with Rasputin on the top, because he is not the top of the list, he is the center of the idea. Now, around the idea of Rasputin, there are four major themes. The first of these is nationalism. So we print clearly the word nationalism on a line, associating it to the center idea. Next was his involvement in politics. So again, on a line, we print clearly the word politics. The third of these four main items was his involvement in religion. So again, we print, and again, connected to the center, the word religion. And finally, rounding off the big four, was his almost legendary involvement in sex. Now here, to begin with, we have the center, the core of the pattern, the core of the idea, and the four main sub-branches. But obviously this isn't where the whole thing ends. There are other ideas attached to these more major, more central ideas. And so we simply build up the pattern by adding other ideas to the ones we've already got. And we add in the same way, connecting with lines, printing clearly on. So let's have a look at nationalism. We know that he was very involved with his country, which was Russia. So we add here Russia. Coming down to politics, we know that he was involved with the rulers of the country at the time. So we have Nicholas and Alexandra. involvement with religion was perhaps one of the main features of him, and we know here that he was a mystic, that he claimed to have extraordinary powers, and here we can branch off this sub-branch that he claimed to be and was an exceptional hypnotist, and he was also a healer. Now, when it came to sex, he was voracious, and so we might here simply note the numerous mistresses that Rasputin had. Now, even now, the pattern is obviously not complete. There are more ideas that can be added to it. And so just to give you an idea of how the pattern would be built up without actually going into all the detail, you would find that from the nationalism branch here, there would obviously be other major branches coming off Russia and branches coming off the sub-branches. In politics, we have the various problems, etc., with Nicholas and Alexandra. There would obviously be other major sections of politics. On religion, one would be concerned with his development in religion, the different kinds of sects to which he belonged, and so one would have sub-branches of this. And on sex, each one of the involvements had other ramifications, and so one could add to those. Now, even here, the pattern isn't completely finished. We can link aspects of the pattern to itself. We're not restricted, as one normally is, and can join parts to connect with each other. So that, for example, we have sex and his mistresses. Now, it was assumed that he had some kind of sexual involvement with Alexandra. So if this is her in the group here, we have an arrow which links him from this part to this part. Now, again, we know that he was a healer, and this is how he became involved with the Russian rulers. He, in fact, was claiming to be able to heal Alexandra's hemophiliac son. So we link the pattern from healing to Alexandra and where her son might have been. Now, looking at this pattern, we can see that it actually is a reflection of the mind's images, the images that the mind actually has inside it. The mind is far happier working like this than it is with lines and lists. So let's see how we can apply patterns for, say, note-taking. Now, what I'm going to do is to talk about the first three programs. Remember, those were on the eye, on memory, and words. Now, standard notes would look like this. There are a lot of wasted words here, so let's start again with 2 sheets of blank paper, no lines. Now, take the left-hand page, add 3 centers. Each one is one of the 3 main areas we discussed: the eye, memory, and words. Now, I'm going to start with the eye. One of the most important things we discussed in that program is the idea of perception. So we add perception. We write it on top of this line, in capitals because they are clearer when you come to look at this again. Now, 2 other important ideas from this program were the idea of the definition of reading and visual aids. Add these, obviously, also to the center. Now, we actually defined reading. The definition in this case was important, so we note it with a code 1. And it's here that the second page of notes comes into use. At this stage, we code 1 on the right-hand page and write the definition because it's important that we have those words. We then connect it by the coded 1 to the left-hand page so that we can see how the pattern and the non-pattern information connect together. Now, I want to continue in some detail with more of this pattern note-taking because the patterns are one of the most important parts of this whole series. So we're going to continue with the other 2 programs. Perception can be developed by adding color, shape, size, and texture. And you also remember that reading involved symbols. We can develop that one for yourself. The reading process